Breaking news, an end to violence spanning 15 months as Israel and the terrorist group Hamas reaches a ceasefire agreement. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Sylvia Perez. This deal is coming after weeks of negotiations. It includes the release of hostages held by Hamas in phases, and Israel says it will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. The fighting started on October 7th of last year when Hamas attacked across the border between Gaza and Israel. Earlier today, talks hit a last-minute snag, delaying the agreement and resulting in some concerns. But Israel's prime minister does still need to approve this final deal. President-elect Trump issued a statement shortly saying, in part, with this deal in place, my national security team will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. Right now, we want to bring into Paul Professor Tom Midas for his perspective. Tom, thanks for joining us. Walk us through what this means.
Well, the details are sketchy, but we have a good outline of what's likely to occur. A three-phase plan, the first phase of which will certainly happen, something like a 6-week ceasefire that probably begins immediately, which will include the release of about 30 hostages. When exactly that will occur is not clear, but perhaps the release of about 250 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. There will be some scaling back of Israeli troops in certain areas. Gazans will be allowed to return to the north, and there will be a surge of humanitarian aid that is desperately needed. The sticking point was the southern entry into Gaza. It was called the Philadelphia corridor between Egypt and Gaza. That appears to have been worked out. After that, it becomes very fragile and uncertain. The best scenario is that the peace holds, there's no further incidents, and Israel further withdraws, more hostages are released. And then the third phase, which we hope and pray happens, is that we move into trying to restore normalcy, which is some degree of rebuilding, and that will take years.
We are waiting from a news conference from President Biden, but as you just heard me say, President Trump already released his statement regarding this. How much of a role did the threats he was making actually have an impact on this? Because he was saying this needed to happen before he got into office.
Well, yeah, ceasefires and agreements like this happen because they're mutually beneficial. So, yeah, it probably did play a role in that the uncertainty, particularly on the side of Hamas, is that he would not restrain the Israelis at all. On the other hand, I think the Israeli government realized that they really have accomplished all they're going to do militarily. They can continue to kill people, but they're never going to completely eradicate Hamas, and they're paying a terrible price in terms of international opinion and whatnot, which may or may not concern them. But I think they just realization that there's no really good way forward militarily made this possible. And he's probably going to be able to sell it to his cabinet by saying, well, okay, first phase is a given. We always have the option to re-engage if they don't appear to be cooperative. So I think he would not be risking announcing that this is a deal if he didn't have his ducks already in a row. So I'm cautiously optimistic that this is going to move in the right direction.
Yeah, and there are
beneficial for the Palestinians.
There are people, too, who did not necessarily agree that this was a way to go. So a lot of controversy involved in this agreement as well. You touched on it just a little bit just now, but I want to ask you again, did Israel really accomplish its role of defeating Hamas? Is Hamas still going to be playing a role on what goes on in that area?
Yes and no. They did. They certainly severely degraded it. They killed Sinwar, the leader, and also they degraded all of Iran's proxies throughout the entire region. So we're going to be into a period in which the capability of any of these organizations to hurt Israel is severely limited. But the problem isn't going to go away because the legacy of bitterness of something like 45,000 dead is going to produce another generation of extremists. So anything short of a lasting peace, and you still have the problem of settlements on the Golan Heights, and particularly the West Bank, an administration who's appointed an ambassador in Mike Huckabee who believes this is biblical Israel and they have a right to take all of it, which is, sowing the dragon's teeth for future conflict. So we can hope that this is clearly a respite. Whether it will be a lasting peace depends on whether there is some kind of permanent agreement on how to resolve the festering issue of territory and the two-state solution, which Netanyahu rejects, but we'll see.
we have to say we're going to have to wait and see, too, what happens next in so many areas, including the humanitarian relief effort that is going to have to go on there because the devastation was incredible. Tom Midas, thank you so much from DePaul. We appreciate your time in helping us break this down.